Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome everybody to the Meet the Grantmakers online. We're so happy to have you. This panel, this funder panel, is a collaboration between Grant Station, the Grantsmanship Center, and Foundant. And on behalf of the center and our partners, we welcome you. Thank you for being here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. People are still joining in from all over the country. So come on in. So my name is Angela Richardson. This is the Meet the Grantmakers panel. We hold these wonderful panels quarterly. So if this is your first time, we welcome you. If you've been with us before, we welcome you back. Each of these conversations is for you all to have conversations with panelists from all over the country to hear what is happening in the world of philanthropy and to hopefully get some of your questions answered. So just a couple of housekeeping logistics. You will notice that we are recording today's event and it will be available for all of you who signed up. So if you have to drop off early, it's totally fine. You're going to get the recording. So we're happy to have you as long as you can stay. In addition to that, closed captioning is available. So if you just go and click on the small C, it'll bring up the closed captioning. You can toggle it on or off if you'd like. And again, I want to say a special thank you to Foundant Technologies and Grant Station for being partners that help us to host these for you all. So again, welcome. So with no further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce the panelists that we have for today. As I mentioned, each quarter we have an amazing group of panelists, so today is no different. So the first panelist I'd like to introduce is Ann Aslett. Ann is the Chief Executive Officer for the Elton Johns AIDS Foundation. They have offices in both London and New York. So she's joining us from London this evening, so welcome, Ann. And then next up, we have Mark Lewis. Mark Lewis is the President and Chief Executive Officer at the POISE Foundation, which is based out of Pittsburgh. And last but certainly not least is Randy Royster. He's the President and CEO of the Albuquerque Community Foundation in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So again, welcome, welcome, Randy, welcome, Mark, welcome, Ann. So as you all can see, we have panelists from across the country here to answer your questions. So how I'm going to start this off for us is I'm going to have each of the panelists introduce themselves and their foundation. So you'll each have about 3 minutes or so each to just introduce your foundation. Tell the viewers anything that's unique about your foundation, maybe even they've got the profile, so you don't have to go through guidelines and priorities and all of that kind of stuff. But anything that's unique about your foundation, any maybe initiatives or projects that you wanted to share, and then we'll get into some questions. And then those of you who are watching live, feel free to start dropping your questions in and we'll get as many answered as we can after the introductions. So with that, Ann, I'm going to ask you to start your introduction.
Thank you. Sure. So the Elton John AIDS Foundation is a independent grant-making charity that's been around for just over 30 years. Our mission is to support frontline services that help end the global AIDS pandemic. Over the time that we've been around, we've funded thousands of programs in over 90 countries. We believe in supporting frontline organizations because we think they're best placed to actually address the issues that we're trying to solve. But we are very keen on partnership is extremely important to us. We are what I would call an engaged funder, which means that we don't just kind of look at an application and then hand over a grant and leave you to it. We like to problem solve with the people that we support, the institutions that we support. We're a big believer in monitoring and evaluation. We like data and very much partnership at different levels and bringing multiple different grantees together to share learning and experience and hopefully to accelerate our progress against our mission. What makes us unique? I mean, well, there's one thing that obviously makes us unique, which is Elton John, and that plays out in many wonderful ways. I would say the other thing that perhaps not makes us unique but unusual is that in addition to funding frontline services, we also do a lot of convening, and that's the partnership piece. We like to bring like-minded people from across a sector to solve a problem, and we do a lot of advocacy. So supporting the individual on the ground, bringing different players within the sector or for a given issue together, and then speaking truth to power, hopefully by advocating for things that we think are going to make a huge change.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne. I look forward to hearing more about that. And next up, let's have you share, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you again for the invite. So POISE Foundation, we are approaching 43 years in existence. We started out as a small grassroots foundation focused on the Black community, actually started with 3 endowed funds. So I'll step back. We are a community foundation. So we started with 3 endowed funds at about $167,000 back in 1980 with no operating income. But the founder was part of a lot of different organizations, governmental organizations, private public partnerships in the 60s and 70s, as well as creating his own nonprofits, youth organizations and such. And what he saw in Pittsburgh at that time was, we're foundation rich here. What he saw was there was not a real focus on really grassroots Black-led organizations in the Pittsburgh area, as well as the foundation dollars that came to us were not always given to us in a way that was culturally, in a cultural context that best suited the organizations within our community. And so he, along with others, said, let's create a foundation that is created by the Black community, that is focused on the Black community, that we can begin to build economic assets that we control and really focus on our community the way we feel that they should be. And so as a community foundation, we're made up of many different funds, donor advised funds. In our community, I would say about 1/3 of our funds are scholarship funds. So education continues to be a huge area of focus for people who want to create endowed funds, at least in our foundation. So over the years, we have given grants to a lot of grassroots organizations in our community, a lot of scholarships, obviously. But what we found in our focus was really in the Pittsburgh area. Over the years, what we found is that we began to attract many donors from across the country because of our uniqueness, which is there are very few Black community foundations in the United States. Up until, I'd say, the last 3 years, we were aware of 3 across the country, and 2 of those are less than 10 years old. We're starting to see more Black funds and Black foundations being created as a result of the pandemic and the intersection of the social unrest that happened, a few years ago. But because we were that unique, people across the country began to seek us out and say, hey, we love your mission. We connect with your mission. And these are Black and white people. And we'd like to create a fund in your foundation. And so outside of grant making, and I'll be quick, the 3 other areas that we really focus on, we act as a fiscal sponsor for a lot of different programs and organizations in our area. So at any given time, we probably sponsor or partner with about 20 different programs or initiatives in our area. And some of these are, again, becoming more national. We also provide grant administration services. So we have partnered with a couple large foundations over the last couple of years and organizations who are looking to do grant making within the community, but because of our cultural context, look to us to supplement both on the administration side. Thank you, Fondant. We do use Fondant as our back office. So both on the administration side, but also, again, because of the cultural context we provide. And then finally, we get, as Anne mentioned, very deeply involved in leadership and advocacy, advocating for our community, both in philanthropy, throughout the community, and really for the nonprofits and the members of our community.
Thank you. Thank you. Wow, such a rich breadth of things that you all do. So thank you for that. And Randy.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. And I wish I was with Anne right now. I would imagine that it's a lot cooler there than it is here in the southwest of the U.S.
Oh, yeah.
We're enduring those multiple days of 100+ temperatures, which is really unusual for us too. So anyway, and thanks to Angela and Jamie and Kathleen for inviting me to be a part of this panel. The Albuquerque Community Foundation is the largest public foundation in the state of New Mexico. And for those of you who may not know much about New Mexico, we're the 5th largest landmass state in the United States, and yet our total population is 2.1 million people. So we're a very rural state. The Albuquerque area has about 1 million of those 2.1 million. So we also actually have a second community foundation, the New Mexico Community Trust. And so that is providing services throughout our state wherever we don't have other community foundations located. Probably what makes us a little bit unique as a community foundation from speaking with my colleagues around the country over almost 2 decades is we have a very strong collaborative relationship with our local United Way. And many community foundations and United Ways look at each other as competitors. We look at each other as partners. We talk about them being the checkbook for the community and we're the savings account for the community. We hold millions of dollars of endowment for the benefit of our local United Way. And we spend time, their CEO and I, speaking to other community foundations and United Ways around the country about how we've been able to collaborate and have a greater impact together in our community than we would have otherwise had if we were functioning as very separate organizations. An example of this has been that back in 2020, we created a joint project called DEI United, with the whole goal of being the 2 largest public funders in our, not only in our community, but in the state, that we wanted to highlight the need for all in our community to be aware of the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion. I will tell you that when you see it written by us, we use lowercase d, uppercase E, lowercase I, because our overall goal is equity. I think the other thing that maybe is unique about us compared to some community foundations is we have a great focus on trust-based philanthropy principles. And so we've been focusing for quite a while on educating our donors, starting with the trustees of our 2 foundations about those principles, but hoping to bring donors around in particularly to those strong principles behind trust-based philanthropy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Randy. Thank you, all of you. One thing that's already popping out to me is each of you in some way mentioned partnerships, different kinds, and how high you value. There's always a thread I find that runs through these panels, and I think so far partnership is what's emerging. So we already have a number of live questions coming in. I think I'm gonna take this first one. This first one is coming in from Claudine. It's similar to one of the pre-questions that we had. And Claudine's question is, and Mark, I'm gonna start with you on the answer for this. What's a common mistake, or she's asking, what's a common mistake you see in grant applications? I would also add, you can also say a common mistake or also something that you see that works really well. I think it's good to hear both parts of that for grant seekers. So anything you could share for those grant seekers out there as they're pulling their applications together?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, what's common amongst most applications is the fact that there are needs, right? I mean, everyone's trying to address a need that they see in their community. What I would love to see more of, which is difficult, and understand this, is ways that that applicant is collaborating or partnering with others. I think the reality is that most of the needs that we have, whether you're talking about housing, health, economic, these are all related or interrelated in some way. And it's a fallacy to think that either we as a nonprofit or even we as foundations can solve these needs on our own. And I think the inherent problem with that is there are limited dollars that everyone is after. And so what I've seen happen is that people shy away from talking about collaborations or partnering with this other organization because we want to make sure that our organization is viewed as either the leader or has a uniqueness or is the one that can stand out to be funded. But I think when we're really talking about trying to solve issues, if that's our goal, we really need to think about, and I use this analogy a lot, where do we place ourselves in the relay race? In other words, we're running what, our path and running what to accomplish what we need to do, but we should be either receiving a baton from somebody else or giving it off to somebody else in this continuum of service. And so for me, it's two things. One, it's that lack of really sharing the partnerships or collaboration. And then it's the idea of overpromising, because we think that if we say we're going to, support 1,000 people or 1,000 units of service, then that's going to sound better to the funder than, we're going to do 50 units of service, but we're going to do it very well. And here's how we're going to do this very well. I think sometimes we, try to inflate or overpromise what we can do in order to present a better light or a better footing to get funding.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you great for that answer. It makes me think about one of the things we cover in trainings, and sometimes this is on the application and sometimes it's not, but this notion of being, wanting to be the best or the only, so you don't want to know, know what other people are doing or mention it or be in partnership with other organizations. And you're saying the contrary, which is we want nonprofits to know what else is happening and where it's relevant, partner with them to solve some of these big issues. So thank you for bringing that point up. Randy, how about you? The same question, common mistakes or things that you think that work really well for grant seekers on their applications?
Just over the last 3 years, we have moved with the grant making that we control as the foundation. So in other words, everything but our donor advised funds, we have moved to completely unrestricted grants. And we think that's been a very positive thing, not only for the grantees, but for us. For a variety of reasons. But I think what we've seen is a little bit of when it comes to the application process now that they know they don't have to be talking about a particular program or something, they can use it any way they want. They tend to focus more on the history of their organization. And what we want to really hear is, what's new and exciting in your organization? What are the wonderful things you're seeing that are changing? And then, as Mark said, we're very much about collaboration. And so we're wanting to hear about, what other organizations in the community are you working with to make a bigger impact today than maybe you made 5 years ago? The last thing that I would say that we encourage, we used to require it, now we just encourage all of our grantees to tell us how the work they do provides economic opportunity for the clients that they're serving. And when we first started that, most of them said, gee, we don't know how we do that. And so we actually held sessions to help them see how they actually provide economic opportunity for their clients. Because I think, our community is probably no different than a majority of communities that are represented by the attendees here today. Poverty is at the heart of every issue that we're trying to make a difference in. And so while we're trying to make a difference in health, in education, in whatever it may be, let's not ever lose sight of, and how can we help people advance in terms of economic opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you, Randy. And Anne.
So it's really lovely to hear this conversation. I mean, I'm absolutely endorse the idea of partnership. I said it at the beginning, and I love Mark's analogy of a relay race. I would say a mistake sometimes is that people will present a problem and what their solution to it is, but they won't give you the context. So it's about partnership, but it's also understanding where do we fit inside this jigsaw of things that need to happen, is one that often is missing. The other thing I would say is sometimes a theory of change, if you like. And organizations have it, but they don't always articulate it very well. So why is what you're going to do here going to get us to there? What calculation have you made that's going to be the outcome? And sometimes, particularly in HIV and AIDS, in the issue that I work in, it's not a straight line, and you really do need to think through and explain as clearly as possible. Whilst this may not look that it's going to end up that way, this is why, because of what we've done before, or because of what we understand about these kind of services. And I think the other thing probably for us would be an assessment of risk. I mean, I completely agree about the thing of over-promising and under-delivering. Put in what you think you can do and do well. Don't over-egg it. But the notion of risk, but we deal with very vulnerable people, with the LGBTQ plus community, with people who use drugs, with young people. And I think sometimes what's missing on applications is an understanding of whether or not the organization has really thought about what the risks might be of providing these services. We all come from a place of do no harm, and it's not that organizations haven't thought about this, it's just that sometimes they don't necessarily articulate it. And maybe that's because they think it's going to put a grant maker off. Actually, that's not the case. It's really reassuring to know that an organization has thought that through, and they've got ways to mitigate that. So I guess they're the ones that would come to mind.
So helpful. So many tips. Every time we do a training, I would tell people, come listen to this first question. I actually have a follow-up question to this topic. Jim put this question in about storytelling. And I think that's something that comes up. And his question is about how important is it to include stories in applications? Or is it important? Does it add to the application? Is there anything that you all would want to share about adding stories? I know that sometimes stories can go on. So I wonder if you all have had any experience with storytelling and what your thoughts are about having that in the application. Does anybody have a follow-up for that? Thought about that?
Yeah, I'll start, I guess.
Okay.
For me, it's extremely important, although it's difficult to really bake that into an application. On one side, we're trying not to overburden, the grantee, potential grantee. On the other side, I think where we have shifted over the last several years is, and I won't say over-reliance, but this huge focus on data, right? And, everybody wants everything to be data-driven. We want kind of best practices and the current words we use out there. But the data itself outside of the context of a story and the actual, what is happening in my community, it's hard to really measure and determine, the real effectiveness of what you're trying to accomplish. And so for me, it's, yes, data is important, but data is data, right? We can take data and use it and manipulate it many different ways. How does that data relate to, your services, your community, your need, and as Anne mentioned, the risk. And so for me, weaving in that story really builds in the context of what's happening. And so it's extremely important. And maybe it's not always in the application, but if all we see is a grantee through an application, then they're rarely successful. Those storytellings happen in pre-application and relationship building, really building that context, I think, is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And it goes back to what I was saying about theory of change. So I love data. I think data is really important, but without context, it doesn't mean anything. And I guess it's hard in application forms, but certainly in every reporting form that we have for grantees, we ask them to tell us a story, because apart from anything else, I think the story is it humanizes it. It stops it being about numbers and makes it about people. And some of the grants that we fund are very large, and you're talking about large numbers of people. But also it underscores that thing about theory of change. We said that we thought if we did these things, this outcome would happen. Here's a story about someone that we've worked with, and this is actually what happened. So I think stories are incredibly important. And yeah, there are other ways. We visit grantees often before we make an award and talk to them a lot about their clients and the people that they work with. But I do think storytelling is essential. Actually, it's essential for grant makers as well, I think.
Thank you. Randy, do you have anything you'd like to add around storytelling on applications?
I think the only thing that I would say is I would agree with Mark. I think in a written application, the storytelling is a little more challenging, and that the opportunities grantees need to be looking for is in their relationship building with funders, to be getting us those stories. And as a community foundation, storytelling is important to us in terms of working with our donors, in terms of making more contributions to grow our community foundations, but also in terms of, as we're trying to encourage them, especially our donor advised fund holders, to consider supporting a certain organization. We need those stories so that we can share those stories.
Good point. Thank you. So you both touched on another topic that's coming up in the question, and it was in one of the questions that was submitted earlier, which is about relationship building with grant makers. I think as grant seekers, it oftentimes can feel very like a mystical experience. Like, how do we do it? How do we do it well? What's doing it? What's too much? What's the best way? The pointed question that's coming up is, so if you're new as an applicant, what's the best way to approach the foundation for relationship building from your perspective? Maybe something that you've seen that's worked really well. And Randy, I'm going to ask you to start us off with this one.
We're happy to do so. I would say again, the business of a community foundation, whether you're making a grant or whether you're seeking support from a donor or whether you are looking to build your role as a community leader in your community, it's all about relationship. And so I think with an organization that would apply with us for the first time, we would hope that they'd be inviting us out to see their operation. Obviously we're a place-based grant-making organization, so most organizations are going to be within close distance for us to be able to do a site visit. We'd like them to come in and visit with us in our headquarters and allow us to tell our story and see where that happens to sync with whatever they're hoping to communicate to us. One of the most effective things I've seen, I've been doing this now for 18 years. One of the most effective things that I've seen just started in our foundation last year. It's not at all my brainchild. I'm not a creative person, but I do a decent job of hiring creative people. And we started something called PEEP events, and it stands for Party Enhancing Equity in Philanthropy. And it's a very low-key event that we host, and we host them all around town. And we invite nonprofits to come. We invite a lot of our staff there. We invite our trustees to come. We invite community and business leaders to come. And it's just a very low-key opportunity for people to be able to connect with each other, to be doing some storytelling, but, you know, on a one-on-one or small group basis. There's no stage and no official presentation. There's always good food and drinks available that enhances people being relaxed and sharing with one another. And that's been really effective for us to develop what I think are more effective relationships with grantees, especially with new grantees.
Thank you for that. So anybody out there in New Mexico, go there. That's a great way. And how about you? How about the Elton John Foundation? What are you all? It's great to hear you guys do site visits as well. So that might be another place of talking about how to do relationship building.
Yeah, so we have a slightly different problem because we do work across a very, very wide, we're a global foundation, we work across a very wide geography. So it isn't always possible to sort of connect with people on the ground. But I think there are a few things. One is it's always a much quicker relationship building exercise if you feel like grantees kind of know your work. They're not just coming to you to ask you for funds. They've got a sense of what you do, and they've got a clear sense of why it's a fit. Often, you know, you'll get people to apply and you're like, we are so not the people to help you with this particular problem. So I think that's very helpful. Again, on the partnership side, a lot of the new grantees that we end up finding is because they've already been working with organizations that we're working with, but possibly in a different way or in a different area. So they understand the context, they understand a bit about us as a funder. And then when we're on site visits, it's a natural thing to say, we'd like to go and see what you're doing, or to include them in visits and so on. I mean, because we're a global foundation, conferences, including conferences in the States, obviously, are incredibly good ways to, we're there, we want to learn, we want to find out what other people are doing. And we always have really rich engagements with people. Again, it goes back to the storytelling. Tell us about what's the vision, what's the passion, how are you doing it, who are you working with, are all really good ways to engage. But it's harder when it's across a very wide geography.
Yeah, thank you. And Mark?
Yeah, just quickly, I'll agree with Randy, first of all, and Anne, that relationship is everything. If we just see you from an application and then you have others you're competing against and we've been to spend time with them, it's just human nature that because you've built some trust or relationship with someone else, there's a much better chance of you understanding that program. I would say there are a few things we do typically. So we have two main grant cycles for our unrestricted funds, and we typically like to have a session where we're inviting, it's a broad ask out to the community, but we're inviting organizations to come in and just learn about the grant cycle. What are we looking for? A time to ask questions. That's just a way for us to invite them in, so there's not that pressure of them trying to create the relationship. I think attending different events where there's broad community and funders may be there, again, not to necessarily create the ask at that time, but just to get to know, hey, I'm from this organization, here's what we do. I think what Anne said as far as researching is critical. You don't want to waste anybody's time. Even on the nonprofit side, you have limited time. So you want to go and develop those relationships that are going to have the biggest impact on your organization. And then the last thing I would say is, don't forget about your board and your board members. Many times they have relationships, maybe with foundation people or others, that can usher you into the door. So it's not you as an executive director or program officer or development person always going to have to, create that relationship. There are probably many people connected or sponsors that you have connections with that can make that connection for you. And so, utilize all those different methods.
It's a great point.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Actually, your board is essential in doing that because they will have relationships that you don't.
Thank you. So I want to switch reels. We've been kind of talking about the nuts and bolts of submitting and relationship building. I want to switch reels. I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't address this question. 4 people submitted this question in advance about AI and ChatGPT and using it as a tool for writing grant applications. So I wanted to bring this forward, and I'm going to start with you. I don't know if you guys are dealing with this at all, but it's coming up. Recently we had an alumni question and answer, and the participants were asking about this as well. So I'd be really curious to hear from any of y'all's perspective about ChatGPT, AI, and using it as a grant seeker. Do you have any thoughts?
So we haven't encountered it yet, as far as I'm aware. But I mean, I think perhaps there are some sort of basic elements of filling out an application form, conceivably, some process-related elements where it would be useful. But we've just spent quite a long time talking about relationships. As far as we're concerned, the application is the starting point from which we then engage with people in person if we can, but otherwise like this or by phone, or to really dig into, okay, you talked about this. What does this mean? Where have you found roadblocks? How have you solved them? So it might get you to one place, but it really is going to let you down once you get beyond that, I would think.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Mark, anything you want to share?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think as AI continues to grow and become more ingrained in what we do in society, from an application perspective, it might be a great tool when we talk about you defining what the need is in your community, where AI can go out and gather data and bring together in context some of what's happening. But when you start talking about the solution, AI is never going to replace your organization's passion, your organization's desire to help, that uniqueness that you bring. I don't think AI is ever going to be able to replace that piece. So I would be very, cautious in relying solely on AI. I mean, it's a tool, right? I think there are benefits that it will have even in this industry, but when you're presenting you and presenting why you're unique or what you can provide, I would not rely on AI for that part of it.
Thank you. Randy?
I would agree with everything that Ann and Mark have said. Like Ann, we haven't encountered it to our knowledge so far. I would hate to see somebody rely on that too heavily, because it's counter to this idea of building relationship. I think another thing that we would probably have to consider if we realized that was being used is which grantees have access to that, and those that don't, what does that do to the equitable process of grant making? If one has access to a tool that another doesn't have. But I think, I guess at this point, I don't think it's just because of my age. I have some, I'm a little skeptical about how that is going to work with foundations and grantees where you're really trying to build relationship.
Yeah, I appreciate you all answering that question. So much in these last 3 years, so much has been emergent in our world on both sides of things that we've had to confront and say, how do we navigate this, be in relationship with this, change our organizations or processes for it. ChatGPT or AI really seems like another one of those things that will show itself over time. And I think I'm very much in alignment with how all of you are presenting the use of it as a tool. And only in certain aspects of the application, like AI cannot they can't offer stories. They cannot do that type of stuff. So thank you all for sharing that. So another question that's coming up, and you all have touched on this, especially Mark and Ann, about evaluation data, metrics, and what's connected to that is demonstrating impact. So the question is, what do you all expect from nonprofits in terms of evaluation of impact and outcomes? And are there ways that foundations that you all are helping nonprofits to understand how to build that capacity into their work. So Anne, I'm going to start with you.
So I mean, I think it's incredibly important because, you know, so much of pretty much everything that we get asked to fund has an emotional rationale to fund it, but we're all here to make a difference to a given issue. And, you know, from the foundation, from Elton down, everyone cares really passionately about this, and some of us have been personally affected. So being able to rely on something that is not subject to emotion or passion is an important part for us of any application or any piece of work that we fund. And yes, we absolutely do help organizations do that. I think it's, you know, I think the problem is that people think if we're going to do data, then we have to go from zero to something incredibly complex and sophisticated. You don't. It's a mindset about, going back to what I was saying about theory of change. If this is what you think is going to happen, unless you find some ways, even if they're proxies for measuring whether that stuff is actually happening, you'll never know. And you don't want to waste the time in doing things that you're not seeing as a difference. So we talk to grantees about start small. If it's scary, if the whole idea of data and monitoring and evaluation is scary to you, let's break this down and see what bits would you feel comfortable that you could track. And the thing that's been extraordinary about that journey is a lot of the time people think of monitoring and data as a kind of, it's like a report card, right? Oh, you either got it right or you didn't. And as you take people through that journey, what's fascinating is, and so exciting, is to see them go, oh my God, I can hold on to this. Like, I know that how this happened. I have numbers, I have proof beyond the kind of, you know, all of the intangible proofs that you also want to be collecting, and the emotional element of it and the stories. I have something I can actually hold on to and I can plan with. And I know if I wanted to do 5 times more of this, it would probably cost me this much money. And I can go to a Grantmaker and I can quantify this is the difference that we can make. So I think it's really valuable. But yes, we absolutely do work with grantees and take them through that journey. And it's been lovely to see them then coming back and going, hey, guess what? We've discovered that, you know, and using data to that effect, and have changed national policies because of data. So
yeah, thank you for that. It's tying into this other question that came in about for grassroots organizations and doing data and evaluation. And what you just shared is, you know, start with what you have. You know, it's not like you have to go out from your first go and hire an outside evaluator and come up with this complex plan, right? And so I'm appreciating you bringing in the kind of start where you are, start right sized. That I think that's applicable for smaller organizations as well. So. Mark, how about you with this question around evaluating impact? What's in high value for your foundation?
Sure. So I definitely agree that we have to measure, right? We have to look at, you know, what you said you're going to do. How do we accomplish those? I agree with Anne. It's not always, you know, we say we're going to do 50 and then, you know, we did 40. What's the story behind that as well? So that's critical. I think for us, because we do work with a lot of grassroots organizations, one of the things that I tell a lot of our grantees is I want to hear the story, not necessarily from you, but from the people that you serve. Because to me, that's one of the biggest evaluative measures that we can get. You know, every nonprofit, and, you know, this is everybody, again, human nature, right? Every nonprofit is going to come with, you know, their best foot forward. What I want to hear is the people you're serving, because they're the ultimate customer, right? The people you're serving, what are they saying about you? Are they saying, hey, we need this organization in our community because they are doing all these great things? Especially when you're dealing with smaller organizations, they may not have the tools, they may not have the experience or expertise to really create, you know, strong evaluation methods or processes. But that customer speaks, you know, volume. I think we're the only industry, right, where we don't necessarily have to respond to the customer. You know, most of the work we do is between the foundations and the nonprofits. But the people we serve and every other industry you can think of, that customer has the final say. They're going to spend dollars with you or not. They've got that final say. So for me, it's what is that ultimate customer, that community person, the person you're serving? What are they saying, about your organization, good or bad? Because that becomes a huge, tool for us to determine whether you are meeting, the needs that you need to meet according to your, again, constituents.
Thank you. And Randy?
I would say that the data that we look for today from grantees is very different from our past because we were making grants for programs. And so we were looking for much more specific data than we look for today in giving unrestricted grants and incorporating more principles of trust-based philanthropy with our grantees. I would say data is still important. So if we're looking at making a grant to a nonprofit working in providing affordable housing in our community, we'd like to know how many people were housed in this last year that before your efforts were unhoused. So we want things like that. I also think that, some level of data is going to be very important to the storytelling component in building your relationship between donors, between the foundation, between grantees. And I think the last thing I would say is I would really encourage, and I hope my colleagues would feel the same, don't be afraid to share data that shows that what you thought you were going to accomplish, you weren't able to accomplish. And, the fact that you had a plan and you worked your plan and the outcome was not what you thought it was going to be is not a negative to us as a funder. We want to know those things. We want to know what other resources could we possibly be providing to you besides dollars that would maybe help you more effectively attain those goals. So don't be afraid to share data that looks like it goes contrary to what your plan was.
How often, grantees hear that? It takes a long time because it does, as I say, it feels like a report card and it's like, we can't possibly tell them that. But it's also how we learn, it's how we as grant makers learn. Geez, this takes longer to do than we thought, or it costs more, or it needs more resources, more staff. It's the most productive thing because it's how we all get better at what we do. It's not designed as a stick to punish people with at all. So I couldn't agree more with Randy.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating this topic because I think it's so nuanced for grant seekers because I obviously work on those who are about to apply and they get nervous in their applications like, well, if I can't say that we're going to serve 1,000 people, like, how do I know? I said, well, you're proposing to serve 1,000 people. And along the way, you'll do evaluation to see whether or not you get there. And then if you see that you're not getting there, you will contact your funder. So I want to just, since I have you all here on this topic of evaluation and communication and relationship building, let's say this is something that's happening. I'm a current grantee. And I'm noticing that in my outcomes and my impact, something's kind of not going according to plan. What is the best way to be in touch with you all and to let you know that I'm learning something about this? How should I do that? How do I make this more transparent? What's the best way to do that? I wonder, Mark, if you have a thought on that, and I'll just see if anybody else does after that. This is a new emergent question, but I think it's an important one that really comes up a lot.
So this is this is the hard one, right? Because again, I think Ed mentioned no one wants to, say, hey, I failed at something. When you think about philanthropy, philanthropy should really be at-risk capital, more so than the financial world, right? The financial world is asking for collateral and all these things. And I'm not saying we throw money away for anything, but we should be willing to take the chance on something. So going back to Ann's conversation about theory of change, the first word, it's a theory, right? If these things happen, then we expect this to take place. I would say, and this is the hard part, if you're going down a path and you see things diverging, have a conversation. It's better to have that conversation in the middle of your process than get to the end and say, well, we were just way off and we just, couldn't do whatever, and the grant's over, or, we're at the end of whatever that time frame is. Have that conversation, reset. Again, that's where the story comes in. You have data, but then there's a story. We ran into a roadblock because we did not expect when we got this far that this barrier would be here. So now we have to rethink about, do we go over the barrier? Do we have to have a different path to go down? But have that conversation. I think as tough as that is, and maybe from both sides, it'll be much more appreciated if it's done then than at the end of the process when there's little you can do and the money, has been spent, your efforts have been gone. So.
Thank you. And Randy and Aaron, you both kind of spoke to this a little bit, but I want to just open the floor to see if you have anything specific you'd want to add in terms of the process of how to do it for grant seekers.
I would just say, don't look at the fact that your theory didn't pan out as you failed. It's not a failure. As Anne said, it's going to be one of the greatest ways to educate us as funders, to be better able to understand really what it's going to take to pull off whatever that theory might have been. So again, don't be afraid of the data not matching your theory. I don't even want to call it failure because it's not failure.
Thank you.
And just to underscore this, because and having, applied for other things over the years, I just think it's so important to say it. We work quite hard with all of the grant managers to say, you mustn't have a conversation with someone where this is a failure. The thing I would qualify about that is if it's going off track, as Mark's saying, to give some real thought about what went wrong, what surprised us, what was the roadblock, where is this off track being derived from? You may not necessarily find the answer, but a million times more, we would rather have a grantee who rings or emails and goes, you know what, can we talk about this? Because this was our theory of change. This is actually what's happened. These are some of the things we think might have gone wrong. And then to problem solve around it, then either, oh my God, we got to the end and it wasn't what we thought, so we're not going to be able to apply to you again. That's not learning for us or for you. And so it's really worth underscoring, but think about what might have gone wrong. You don't always know, but it's helpful as well.
Yeah, I'm really appreciating. Oh, go ahead, please.
Yeah, just if I could add just quickly, and this is, probably more so for the funders to really think about. But when we think about the funders and nonprofits, it's a partnership. The funders are coming with some knowledge and we're coming with money, right? But we're not the ones out there doing the service. The grantee is out there doing the service. And so if this is a partnership, bringing that information to the table early on could have us both start thinking about, okay, how do we rethink what needs to be done? Anne said before, maybe it is more money, maybe it's more time. But these are the things that through a partnership, let's put this information on the table, come together, rethink, reset, and then say, okay, the need is still there. Let's figure out how to, come up with an alternate plan to achieve what we want to achieve.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I was like, one of the things that's striking me is this is a partnership. So, right, in a partnership, you have to communicate on both sides of like it's working or it went differently. So thank you for bringing that up, Mark. We're almost out of time, but let me see if I can get this question in, which is, do you encourage applicants, this is kind of connected to what we're saying, do you encourage applicants that are rejected to ask for feedback from your foundation? So let's say they've applied, do you encourage applicants to apply again? Do you encourage them to apply after they get some feedback? What is your take on that? And Randy, let's start with you.
I guess we are always encouraging grantees to apply, and they shouldn't not apply based on not being funded the first time they apply, or at some point when they're applying and they're not funded. I think if they take the time to reach out to us to discuss anything that could be behind why they weren't selected, that's going to be worthwhile. More often than not, I'm sure it's the same for Mark and his community foundation and anybody else that's listening in from a community foundation. So often the reason somebody is not funded is because we simply don't have enough money to fund all the requests. But then other times it may be, we might be able to offer advice on how their presentation could be tweaked a bit to maybe have more of a influence on the panels that we assemble to make those decisions. So yeah, we want to always keep conversations going.
Nice, thank you. Anne?
I mean, it's such a hard one. And when you have, a sort of demand that outstrips supply by 500 or 1,000 to 1, horribly often the answer is we just didn't have enough money to do all of this. And I would love to say that we give everybody feedback, detailed feedback. We absolutely do when people ask for it. And sometimes if we feel that a proposal missed just by either by timing or by some piece of it that wasn't quite there yet, for sure we're going to give them that feedback and encourage them to come back and reapply. It's miserable when you have to tell people, I'm really sorry, it was a great idea, it was a great proposal, we just don't have the funds to do it. But wherever possible, we would definitely want to have that dialogue with an applicant for sure.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, same as Randy and Ann. We always offer feedback when asked. Probably too many applicants just to say, hey, we're going to give feedback to everybody. But it's our goal to want to see the nonprofits in our community be successful, right? Again, we have so many needs that are out there in so many different ways that, if a nonprofit can become successful, or it might have that solution, next year that it didn't have this year. I think it's important to really help them to think through, how do they build capacity? How do they refine their ask? How do they, kind of focus their services in a different way that might be more competitive? So I think these are always critical conversations. I think for me, anyway, it's much harder when you have a strong relationship or even a personal relationship with a grantee, and then you have to tell them no. It makes it difficult. But, the reality is, as everybody has said, there's limited dollars, many nonprofits, services probably beyond the number of nonprofits that are needed. And so it's just a tough, situation. But yes, continue to apply. Don't take, I didn't get funded as a rejection of who you are or what you do. It could be timing. It could be, many different reasons.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you all. So we're coming at the top of the hour, and I just want to do our closing round. And in this closing round, you can share any final thoughts that you might have. We had over 800 people register for this webinar. So any wisdom that you could share for grant seekers that you want to leave them with. And I'm going to start with you, and then we'll just end with Randy.
I think what I'd say is, we've talked about it all through this conversation, is this thing about partnership. This is not a lottery. This is two like-minded entities coming together and saying, let's see if we can make a difference to this. Let's see if we can make this better. And going into that in that spirit, rather than I've got to fill out a whole form and fingers crossed, we think we're wonderful, fingers crossed we get it. Think of us as partners, really. And if you're not sure before you go to apply for something, ask questions. Is this helpful for me to include this? Is it not? Because when it works, and I'm sure Mark and Randy have had the same experience, when it really works, it's such magic for both the grant maker and the grantee, because you go on a journey together. And I mean, we're a multi-year funder. I very firmly believe that it's very hard for people to make a difference in 12 months. And so, we've had grantees that we've traveled a journey for 5, 6, 7 years together, sometimes longer. And think of it in that spirit. We're here to be helpful. We're here to to partner with you.
Thank you. Mark?
Yeah, I echo everything Ann said. The only thing I would add is don't always think that the interaction has to end with dollars. There could be great conversations, there could be great ideas, could be all types of things outside of just, a check in the mail or, dollars being transferred that might really help your organization along the way. It could be connections, it could be, introduction, all these different things that you could get out of the relationship outside of the dollars. Just do not discount that because those could be critical to your growing and your developing capacity for the future.
Thank you. And Randy?
Total agreement with everything said by my colleagues. The only thing that I would add is I think that we're all aware of a historic imbalance of power between funders and grantees. In some cases, that's real. In some cases, it's been perceived, but perceptions become folks' reality. And so I hope that those that attended today would walk away from this having heard from three very different funders and would really hold on to this idea of partnership, collaboration, and relationship building, because I think a majority of funders today really are seeking to how do we get rid of that power imbalance? And how do we have an effective partnership?
Thank you. What a great note to end on. Appreciate that. So Randy, Mark, and thank you all so much for joining us for this panel, for your insights, for sharing your wisdom and letting us know. I think you've given all of us a lot of really rich gems and practical things too, of how to approach seeking grants, not just from your foundations, but in general. And I want to thank all of you, all participants, viewers, those of you that are listening live and will watch the recording later. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for sending your questions in. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them. There are more than we could get to, but we appreciate them and we appreciate you joining us for this next Meet the Grantmaker panel. Save the date. The next one is October 11th, so make sure you put that on your calendar. You will get a reminder email about it, as well as this recording. And of course, we would have to thank our partners, Foundant and GrantStation, the Grantsmanship Center, for making this possible. So until next time, we thank you and we'll see you. Good luck.